Over the years, I've become a huge Resident Evil fan, particularly Resident Evil 7 got me sold on this series, and I've gone and I've played basically everything they've released and gone back to some of the old games as well. So Resident Evil 9, of course, is a very exciting moment, not just for me, but for fans of not just Resident Evil, but the entire genre of survival horror. And it's finally here. I played it and beat it, and I want to tell you all that I think about it. So before we get into that though, welcome to my channel. I'm Dustin. I do videos here every week, and I also stream on Wednesday nights. So if you like what you see, if you don't mind, hit me with a subscription. We're trying to get to 25K subscribers. It would mean a lot. But let's talk about Resident Evil Requiem. Some important context to go into this is just that Resident Evil is a very interesting IP because they've had two different flavors of Resident Evil for a good, I don't know, 10 years now, since Resident Evil 7, where the series was at a really bad point with 6, and it was reinvented with 7 in this first-person, back-to-roots survival horror mode. But at the same time, as they were making 7 and 8, they were also remaking some of their old games with 2, 3, and most importantly 4, which was kind of the peak of more action-oriented Resident Evil. And so when it came to making Resident Evil 9, I'm sure there was a question at Capcom, are we going to make a first-person game, or are we going to make a balls-to-the-wall third-person action-style horror game? And so Resident Evil 9 ends up being both at the same time, with two protagonists, one being Grace Ashcroft, who is first person, much more limited in terms of her speed and the weapons she can use and how vulnerable she is in the environment, and the other half being the boy returning, Leon S. Kennedy, who of course is just so extra, over the top, and has all kinds of different abilities and is just going around kicking ass all the time. So yeah, in that way, Resident Evil Requiem is certainly maybe the most unique title in the Resident Evil mainline games, having both of these sections. So how does it pull it off? First things first, this game visually is absolutely amazing. I've been playing this on PlayStation 5 Pro, and there was of course the whole thing about this having the new PSSR 2, the updated version, and it looks absolutely fantastic for the most part. There are moments in this game where you just kind of want to stop and look around and be like, man, this looks totally crazy. I do think there are a little bit of issues, particularly, I don't know if it's the upscaler or the engine, but there are points where it looks like a little bit noisy on the screen or like a little smeary on the edges, but that's really just me being nitpicky. The other thing I want to praise too is just how cool and gross and disgusting this game is. The monsters in this game are awesome, particularly this one from the beginning, the girl. Is very freaky, and this beginning section really had me freaked out multiple different times. The zombies also have had a huge improvement, where older Resident Evil games, they're kind of just mindless, generic zombies, which of course there is variations of them, or more powerful ones, right? But this game, zombies have a little bit of personality. You can hear them talking, you can hear them singing. Some of what remained before they got infected is still there, and that makes things really interesting going from room to room, where it's not just like, oh, here's another zombie in here for me to deal with, but whatever they were doing before they got infected is still kind of there, whether it's someone that's trying to clean a bloody bathroom or a cook with a giant cleaver. So that made things really interesting along the way. So getting back to the format of this game, the first half, and there's no spoilers in this review. I'll put this at the beginning too, that there's no spoilers, but the first half of this game is really focused on Grace in this first person. If you like, you can also choose to play in third. I played it developer intent first person in one section, which is this hospital, and this is like totally classic Resident Evil stuff, running around trying to find different items, solve puzzles, and you're also very vulnerable while you're doing that. There are small Leon interstitials though that give you more of that action focused, more like Resident Evil 4 throughout this first half. And then the second half of the game, which I won't touch on very much at all because I want people to go and enjoy this game, and there's going to be a spoiler cast on Last Stand Media for you to listen to if you want to know in depth about everything, but second half of the game is more focused on Leon with a little bit of Grace stuff too. It's very interesting because the gameplay is excellent in both the first person Grace stuff and the third person Leon. They both manage to pull it off so well. I think though there is a little bit of an issue of cohesion throughout it. Specifically, once you beat this main section as Grace, it's not the last time you're gonna play as her, but that's kind of the crescendo, the climax of playing as her. And then the second half goes all to Leon mostly, but the Grace sections after that just simply do not live up to that first section. There's an element too that I found a little disappointing with the dual protagonists, is that when in a normal Resident Evil game you're playing as one character, you are so limited at the beginning, and throughout the game, as you get new weapons and you get more items and the ability to craft more items, you slowly build up your arsenal to, by the end, you have all kinds of different things to choose from. But in this game, because you're splitting your time between these two characters, that sense of progression is severely diminished. In a lot of ways, this game feels like you're playing two smaller Resident Evil games that got mushed together. And I'm not sure what happened with Capcom in this game. There were rumors years ago that there was going to be a more open Resident Evil game starring Leon, and the remnants of that are still there. There was rumors that it was having some development issues. And so this game does feel disjointed in that way. I think it still manages to pull it off in a really interesting way, but you can see remnants of multiple different ideas and directions for this game that are still lingering. And that's why, as I said earlier, I think it lacks the cohesion of some of the previous entries. In terms of the story, Resident Evil has always been, at least to me, kind of all over its place with the story, though this one in particular, a lot of people have compared it to Metal Gear Solid 4. They're saying that this game is a love letter to Resident Evil, and it's no spoiler. This is not a spoiler. It's on the cover of the game that you go back to Raccoon City. Overall, there is a lot of nostalgia baiting, or whatever you want to call it, in this game, where they're calling back to previous Resident Evil games, and not all of it is effective to me. I kind of was thinking after I beat the game that Resident Evil Requiem in some ways reminds me of The Force Awakens, where clearly it's a new thing in this series, but they want to call back to the past, regardless of if it makes sense or not. And I think it's totally valid to be like, I don't care, it's Resident Evil, it doesn't need to make sense, and I respect that. There were plenty of moments that got a pop from me. I was excited to see various things happen in the game, and then on reflection, I'm like, yeah, that was cool, and I was excited because I knew that thing. But did it actually make any sense? Some of the nostalgia stuff really worked for me, and other parts didn't, and I don't want to say I'm above that. Like I said, I got some excitement, but at the same time, I'm like, are they just jingling some keys of previous Resident Evil games in front of me for that? Particularly with the story, it definitely breaks down at a lot of points, and that comes back to the cohesion thing I was saying, where sometimes you don't know what you're doing or for what reason. I think the story kind of goes off the rails in the second half, where it's kind of lacking a strong direction, and you're just kind of told something and you're just supposed to go with it. And again, Resident Evil has never been necessarily like a huge story-based thing. It's more of an action movie or like a popcorn movie for me, so I don't want to knock it too hard for that, but I think it's worth bringing up. The question I get a lot when I do a video like this is like, okay, but where do you rank it in the Resident Evil, pantheon of the highest tier games? This game to me is probably, I don't want to say lower tier, but if I think about like the top tier, Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil 2, those games are all above this to me. And it comes back to that lack of cohesion. Is it better than 8? I think 8 has some of its own problems, particularly in its pacing in the second half. So I don't, they're kind of in same tier for me. Overall, I had a really great time with this game, with those criticisms, it's still probably going to be one of my favorite games this year. Absolutely. I guess I'm always just a little hesitant to just see hype moments and then be like, well, this game is amazing because of that. I have a little bit of reservation against that. And I know it's not going to be popular, but I think in the future for Resident Evil, while this experiment of doing two at the same time, I think I would rather just see one or the other. Just do first person, just do more traditional survival horror, or go action based. Clearly, Capcom has the output capacity to do both of these types of games, since we've been getting new mainline games and remakes of old. But this, in a way, it reminds me of the song "A Day in the Life" by the Beatles. Maybe a deep cut reference if you don't know this band, but that song is clearly John Lennon and Paul McCartney having two separate ideas for a song that maybe wasn't necessarily going anywhere, but when combined make one cohesive thing that is very good, but you can see the seams a little bit. And whether or not that bothers you is going to be up to you. So that's it for this video on Resident Evil 9. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. As I said earlier, if you want to know full-blown spoiler stuff, we are doing a spoiler cast on Last Stand. It's going to be first on our Patreon and then public for everybody a long time later. So check that out there. I'll put the link in the description. And if you haven't yet, as I mentioned earlier, make sure to subscribe for more videos from me. I appreciate you. We'll see you next time.